Hey everybody, it's Holly
and Heather,
and welcome to our Sunday edition of Everything Elvis. This one might be my favorite Everything Elvis we've done. Today we are going to be doing an in-depth review of the new Elvis movie. It may be a two-parter. We're going to try to cover everything, but we only have about an hour or so to be on here, and who knows, there's a lot to cover. There's a lot we want to ask you, so if you've seen the Elvis movie, join us. If you have not and you don't want spoilers, watch us at a later date. Go see the movie and then come back and watch this and we'll talk about it. So we're going to, today Heather and I are going to really try to get through all of our thoughts and things that we thought and go in depth about the scenes, the characters, the movie, and then hopefully we'll do a part 2 and we can answer everybody's questions or respond to comments. So if there's anything you have to say about the movie,
you know how it's going to go.
You don't. So welcome in if you are a part of our Elvis family. If you know anyone that is going to go see the Elvis movie or has already, please share this video with them. We would love to hear everybody's comment on it. There's been so many reviews online.
Oh my gosh.
And they've run the gamut. They have run the gamut between love and hate.
This is going to be just our opinions.
Yes, let's do a little
this is just
disclaimer.
Be mine, Holly's opinions of the movie and what we thought and things we enjoyed and all that kind of thing. So take it with a grain of salt.
Exactly. This is our opinion. You may not agree with it all. You may agree with it all.
That's fine.
That's fine.
What we want to talk about.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. But so Heather, why don't you say hey to everybody? I'm going to try to get us on the out.
Yeah, welcome in. Everybody's jumping on. No, I just want to say, and don't you love our posters in the background? No, I just want to say first and foremost that this movie, it is doing our mission that we've been talking about. Seriously. Elvis is everywhere.
Yes.
Everyone is talking about Elvis from everywhere. Literally talking about Elvis. I mean, you were seeing Elvis on magazines, on TV. They're doing all kinds of interviews in newspapers, magazines, books. Yeah, like he's everywhere. You go on Facebook right now or you go on the internet and it is just like everybody reviewing this movie, talking about this movie. My whole week at work this week have literally been people bombarding me being like, oh my gosh, I saw the Elvis movie and it's amazing.
Oh, remind me, I have a great work story too.
Yes, so I mean, it is just like, it is accomplishing our mission of continuing Elvis's legacy, keeping him and his music and his legacy alive, and bringing it to a whole new audience, young and old, and a whole new generation out there that's gonna, continue to carry on this torch and love that we all have for Elvis.
Yeah.
And Holly and I are super excited because we've already seen the movie twice.
And wanted to go back a third time right after
or a fourth or a fifth. And I encourage you,
yes,
if you have seen it already once, go see it again. Because the second time, you're going to see so many more things that you didn't see the first time. And pick up so many more little, storylines and things.
And Easter eggs.
Yes, that you didn't see the first time. So, and I loved it the first time I saw it. And I loved it even more the second time I saw it.
I did too. Well, I'll say this. You can comment below. You don't have to elaborate. Just comment. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you just kind of in between? Let us know in the comments, and then we'll go through them and use that for a part 2. But one thing I think we can all agree on, and I will start with this because I have seen this across the board.
Yeah.
Austin Butler channeled Elvis. He deserves an Oscar nomination. He deserves the win, in my opinion. Even though, everybody's been skeptical because he does not look like Elvis, but we have covered this. No one does. No one ever will. Unless, I guess, you got some plastic surgery. But when I say I have never seen an actor embody and channel the swagger and charisma and voice and just personality of a real person, I mean, never could I see this. He nailed it. So, and everybody across the board has said, even people that have been like, I hated the movie, they were all like, but that Austin Butler is a star.
Well, I think those were two things. Well, actually, I think there was a few things that we all, as true Elvis fans and followers, kind of went into this movie nervous about. Number one, I think we were all nervous about the actual movie itself.
Yeah.
Like, Baz Luhrmann, what was he going to do? Like, what, take was he going to take on Elvis's life and story? What moments was he going to play up? Was he really going to play into the whole drug thing and the ending? You know, so how was he going to treat Elvis?
How tasteful was it going to be?
How was he going to treat Elvis and Elvis's story? We were all nervous about that. And then I think we were all like, okay, this Austin Butler, is he really going to do Elvis justice?
Yes.
You know, is he going to do Elvis justice? And I think both those things got accomplished
absolutely
brilliantly. Like honestly, because I was nervous about it as well when I first because I wasn't familiar with Austin.
No,
at all.
I was not either.
I know he's done some like Broadway things and some like
kind of smaller
Disney
movies
things and stuff, but I wasn't familiar with him, which I also think is great that they got someone that nobody was really familiar with. But I was nervous about how he was going to do and how he was going to be. But man, he knocked my socks off.
And I'll say this, and here's why I'll say it. I think a lot of this movie that was polarizing to a lot of people is Baz Luhrmann's directing and cinematography style. He has a very specific style where he does almost like panels and different like collages, and it's very fast paced. That is his style. And I thought about it. I was like, would I maybe wanted to see a movie that was a little more traditional? Maybe. But Elvis was never traditional. No. And I think Elvis would have been like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest spectacle I've ever. You know, Elvis was a spectacle. And this was kind of a spectacle.
Yes.
And I think Elvis would have.
But in a good way.
In a good way. Yeah, absolutely. So I thought that was great. And because I'll tell you, one of the big hang-ups, this is my work story. So I'm at work the other day. This is a coworker I've worked with, I couldn't tell you how long. And we were somewhere doing something. And he literally looks at me and he's like, so I saw you're an Elvis fan. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, have you seen the movie? And I said, yeah. And he's like, I'm not going to go see it. And I go, why? And he goes, I'm a huge Elvis fan, and I can't bring myself to see it. Well, come to find out, he is in a band, or used to be in a band that Danny Keough was the drummer for. Oh. So he has met Lisa, Priscilla, which, by the way, I asked if she was just as nice in person, and he said she was a doll. He said she was so nice. But he was like, I just can't get past the fact that he doesn't look like Elvis. And I said, okay, let me stop you there. We have all had this concern, but I am telling you, he channels, he got the essence, the spirit. And I think I changed his mind. I think he may go see it. So don't let that scare you.
Yeah, which was, the great thing about it is, because Austin really, as you're watching this movie, you become, engrossed. And you become involved in the characters, in the storyline, in the struggles. It is like an emotional roller coaster, this movie. I mean, there are points when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're angry, when you're, tears, you're laughing, there's humor. It kind of ran the gamut as far as emotions and things. But yes, Austin really captured everything down from Elvis's, the way, his, eyes, the seriousness in his eyes and the broodiness, to his
and you're talking about how Elvis put his glasses,
to his smirk, to his laugh, to, how he would always, he always, lifts up his glasses, he bows his head and pushes his glasses. Yeah, all those little, mannerisms and things that make Elvis, Elvis. And his performances were great.
Yeah. And here's another point I'd like to make. Oh, but before I do that, let me tell you about the performances. I was watching an interview. I didn't know this. So they do a lot of just snippets of, the Vegas show and the city come back and all that. I did not know this, but Baz did. I thought they were like, okay, everybody set up, we're going to do Suspicious Minds. And they'd, do the, film this 5-minute clip of that. And okay, let's set up again and do it again. No. He said they did full-on concerts, start to finish, time after time. I can't imagine being an audience member, because, he literally said we just did the full-on concert, so there'd be continuity, there'd be no, set up and do it again. So, I mean, can you imagine Austin filming those just all back to back?
I think that's what also gave so much authenticity.
Yes.
To the movie and to the performances, is that because if you watch Austin in the Vegas years and stuff, if you watch Elvis in his shows and concerts, he by the end of them is just a sweaty mess. Yeah. He's just covered in sweat because he is literally giving it his all. And that was Austin, so you could tell okay, he's probably been filming this over and over and over and over.
And so my next point is that a lot of people have had contention with is the style and the way of the film as far as accountability, truth, all the accuracy. But the thing of it is this, because I'll say about this, I would be mad if Baz was like, every single second of this movie is true. This is exactly how it happened. But he's not saying that. He's saying, I took liberties. I took creative liberties. I moshed, things together. Well, I was going to say mosh pit. Like a little mosh. I got it wrong. A mosh pit of just like different things he pulled from, because you can't go through every single year in this order. Like, somebody was griping like, oh, there's a scene where it's kind of showing Priscilla and Elvis meeting for the first time, and it's when he's in Germany and they're up in his room and she's talking, and he puts on music, which I think that's what she said. They used to just talk and listen to music. Well, he puts it on. Well, it's Casey Musgrave singing "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You." All right, we all know that song didn't come out in that year. It was not out until, a decade or so later, and we know Casey Musgraves wasn't the person who was playing, but it was just to give it like a feel, and, to incorporate the soundtrack and all that. So, are there inaccuracies? I'm sure there are, and there are, but Baz is not saying, hey, this is from the horse's mouth. This is, direct.
At the end of the day, this is a movie.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is a movie. And, of course, there's going to be cinematic liberties and things taken with the storyline, with the shots, all of that kind of thing. But it's trying to tell a story and trying to keep a certain timeline and everything. And also trying to pull from all kinds of different times in Elvis's life and scenarios, and maybe interviews and things Elvis has said and performances and instances, and maybe take all of those and put them into one, or put them in another time frame to really tell the story. And so I think it did. And, like we said a couple of weeks ago, when you think about, like, hats off and applause all around to Baz and Austin, because those two both took on impossible feats. Number one, Baz taking on a subject like Elvis, he knows that there's going to be critical eyes at every turn, like criticizing every single thing he does. And how do you really honor and do justice to someone like Elvis Presley? And how do you take a 42-year life and career and compact it into a 2.5-hour movie that is going to hit on all of the important moments and times and places and people, and make it make sense? So, good gosh, that was amazing. And we all know that he has a longer cut, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then, Austin, to take on Elvis Presley, to try to, like, fill his shoes, and even, it's just like, what they both accomplished, I think, is amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. So let's get into the movie. Let's talk about the beginning and into the 50s. So we'll start with there. The beginning of it, it's an odd beginning, but I thought it really came together well. How it kind of starts you off at the Louisiana hayride, but then it does the flashbacks to his childhood to really kind of get the influences of his childhood, the black culture, churches, Captain Marvel, all of that. I thought it was a really unique and interesting way to start it off.
Yeah.
Probably, because I was thinking about it the other day, and my favorite part might be this. The whole 50s section, because if you all know me, I'm more of a 67 to 77 Elvis girl. I love older Elvis, 70s Elvis. That's my favorite Elvis. I appreciate the 50s stuff, but it's not my favorite. Like, I love it, but it's not my favorite of the Elvises. But I think in this movie, that was my favorite part, only because, and I heard someone else, I can't take credit for this, I heard someone else on YouTube, because I've been watching other people's reviews. He explained it this way. For someone that's not an Elvis fan, or even someone that is, even though I am a huge Elvis fan, you kind of look at some of those things in the 50s and you're kind of like, yeah, he was moving, but I mean, that wouldn't be considered anything in today's world or whatever. But what I think Baz showed is how instrumental and how shocking and record-breaking, society, cultural-breaking the 50s were for Elvis and his artistry and his stage presence. He compared it to, like, and this movie is what I'll say about this. He compared it to this. If you have a teacher that's talking to you about Elvis and they just go, okay, well, he was very popular in the 50s, he was considered vulgar, but you'd be like, okay. It's, some people can't learn that way. You're just kind of like, okay, yeah, you're saying this, all right, great. But if you have a teacher that shows you that immerses you in it and shows you this is the hysteria this man caused. This is the effect he had on people and society as a whole. Then you get it. And I think that's what this movie did. I think Baz immersed you in it and was like, this is why Elvis was so iconic in the 50s and such an important part of music. You know, that too.
It's kind of like when you always hear like Elvis started rock and roll, and Elvis was the birth of rock and roll. You know, he was that original rock and roller and rebel, and that is who he was, and that's the revolution that he started. You know, he took all of this amalgamation of music from his childhood and from his upbringing and the people he was around and associated with, from the rhythm and blues to the country to the gospel music. Elvis took all of those influences and just melded them together into one, and then put his own style, his own spin, his own name on it, and then it just exploded. You know, he brought forth what nobody else could or would do, you know. And the funny thing is that it showed you that Elvis, you know, all of this craziness was going around him. Of, you know, people saying like, you know, tame it down, quit moving, quit wiggling, you're vulgar, you're the devil, you're whatever. And Elvis is over here like, what is going on? I have the music in me. This is who I am. This is, you know, the music comes through me, you know, head to toe. And, you know, not thinking anything of it. And I think that also right from the beginning, because one thing about this film, and I thought it was really cool actually, and I also didn't know how I was going to feel about this, but I thought it was really cool that Baz actually kind of told this from the perspective of Colonel Tom and Colonel Tom and Elvis's relationship. Because I was also kind of worried that it would almost like overshadow Elvis in the movie. Like that, you know, it would focus too much on like Colonel Tom and overshadow Elvis. And it didn't. It didn't at all. But also, I think that, you know, this really went to show like the struggles that Elvis went through. Early on and throughout his life, in his career, you know, because a lot of people think like, oh, Elvis came along and he was this overnight sensation and he just, you know, took off and it was like all sunshine and roses and up from there. But, you know, he went through a lot there in the beginning, and, you know, trying to be true to himself and be true to the artist that he was and the music that he loved and the music he wanted to sing. You know, he went through a lot of struggles with, you know, people literally trying to be like, you know, no. You can't sing that. You can't do that.
And the whole seeing the relationship between him and Colonel Tom Parker, it's almost a cautionary tale that's timeless. Because it's like, don't, you know, how much of your life do you give away? And how much do you entrust another person with your career and basically your life? And that is true for any artist starting out today or people that started like 100 years ago when entertainment, you know, first started. Like, that's just a timeless cautionary tale, and it does show you you can be, you know, it's almost like the Marilyn Monroe thing. You can be the most beautiful, talented, rich person in the world, but you also could be and most of them are, the loneliest, the most isolated, miserable. Yeah. And so I thought it was good that it didn't shy away from. I mean, of course, Elvis had a great life. Like they say, he lived 10 lifetimes in one. And got to do great stuff. And I'm sure there were moments where he was just unbelievably happy and stretches of time. But I mean, there were also times I'm sure he was down. So I was glad it portrayed that. Like, I really feel like it did humanize him and humanize kind of the people around him.
Well, I thought the movie did a great job of showing Elvis's complexity in every way. You know, Elvis was complex as a human being. Elvis's music and artistry was complex. Elvis's relationships were complex, and we'll talk about those. That's what I'm saying. His relationship with his parents, with Priscilla, with the Colonel, with the Memphis Mafia, even the fans. Elvis's relationships were complex. So I think this movie really did a lot to show like the complexity of all of that.
So for the first part of the movie, you know, the intro in the 50s, I loved all of it. I really think it's going to the newer audience and the newer people that don't know what all the fuss is about Elvis, I really think this is going to go, they're going to go, okay, I get it now. So I'm like, great job about the 50s. Heather, why don't you take the 60s, because you really enjoyed the whole 68 Comeback Special scenes and Steve Bender and...
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, one of my favorite performances ever of Elvis is the 68 Comeback Special. And, you know, I thought that, I was glad that they spent a lot of time on that in the movie, because I think that was a very pivotal time in Elvis's life.
It was make or break.
Yes, it was very much a, you know, here I have not been, you know, performing and touring as much. I've been doing all these movies. You know, they started out great and then they kind of not so great. And
he wasn't relevant anymore.
Yes, yes. And he was kind of felt like he was losing himself. He felt like he was losing his audience, and he's like, where do I go from here? So, you know, starting from the beginning of that, when he decided to meet up with Steve Bender and his partner and kind of, you know, say, I want to get back, you know, to Elvis, you know, and Steve Bender says, who is Elvis? You know, and kind of their whole collaboration, because, you know, we all know, like, that the whole Colonel Tom thing was he wanted to do this special and he wanted to do this Christmas special. You know, and I kind of think it talks about that in the movie, that Colonel Tom more so saw it as going to be like Elvis singing some Christmas songs, and, you know,
he was trying to put Elvis into the adult entertainment, like Perry Como.
He wanted to be a Dean Martin.
Yeah, you know.
And so, you know, it was going to be this whole Christmas special, and that was the kind of thing. And, you know, when Elvis, like, enlisted the help of Steve Bender, and he was like, you know, no, we don't do that kind of special, you know, and then they kind of started coming up with the 68 Comeback Special. I mean, man, it was just, like, awesome. And honestly, Austin's performance in this was amazing. And if you go back and watch some interviews with Baz, and the one that Holly and I posted from when we saw the Elvis movie in Memphis, you know, he says that Austin's first day on set, like the first filming they did, was the 68 Comeback Special.
I don't know how this got
now looking at it, I'm shocked, because Austin seemed so comfortable and so like just ready for it. And then I watched an interview with Austin, and he said that literally when he did the 68 Comeback Special, especially when he's in I call it the ring, the sphere, when he's in that, you know, with the audience, he was like, honestly, when I did that, he was like, I was so nervous, like, to do it. And he was like, but once I got out there, he was like, it was so electrifying. And he said, and once I, like, looked down and saw the audience, he said, it was like I was looking through Elvis's eyes.
Oh,
that just gave me chills.
That was great.
That just gave me chills. But yeah, the 68 Comeback Special, I loved all the shots that they did with it. I loved the humor that Baz brought in with the Colonel, and him being like, here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus.
So
and like the Christmas sweater, and how, you know, he was, and I think that really was a poignant moment of the movie to really delve into Colonel Tom and Elvis's dynamic and relationship, because you really saw that you had Elvis over here, who was the true musician and artist, and that's all Elvis cared about. Elvis wanted to sing the music that he loved. He wanted to connect with the audience. He wanted that affair and relationship with the audience and the fans. And you had Colonel Tom over here, who's like, I want to make money. You know, how much merchandise can we sell? What else can we come up with? You know, and he's not thinking anything about the music and the songs. He just cares about, like, how much money can we make off of this, and how much merchandise can we sell. And it also kind of showed, you know, a little bit of, I think, Elvis's defiance. You know, that Elvis, and I guess we'll talk more about the Colonel Tom Elvis relationship. But, you know, I think a lot of people sometimes think that the Colonel walked all over Elvis a lot, or most of the time. But I think this really showed, like, Elvis's defiance, that he's like, you know, when it comes to music, I know best. And I know what I want to do, and I know what I want to sing. And I think that showed, you know, that in that segment as well.
Well, and I think it showed both of their strengths and weaknesses, and why they needed each other, and why they worked as a team. Because you have to think, without Elvis's input, the 68 Comeback Special would have been a snooze fest Christmas show, and he would have went on into that like, I'm going to do a lounge act.
Well, it would have been a flop. It would not have brought Elvis back.
Right.
Like, you know, it's called, like, it was not called the 68 Comeback Special. That's not the name of it. It was like, what, the singer presents Elvis Presley. But that did bring Elvis's career back.
But on the flip side, would Elvis have even had that opportunity had not Colonel Tom went and got this thing with Singer, you know, got this sponsorship, got this TV time slot. So it's like the chicken and egg, you know, yin and yang. So I think it did show how diverse they were, how different, but how they both needed each other to a certain point.
Yeah. And how funny, like, Colonel Tom is, because I'm sure that was, like, added fodder, but probably what he said and thought, like, you know, at the end when, you know, he says, oh, but the 68 comeback special was my idea.
Yeah.
It wasn't at all. I mean, as far as, like, the actual special, like, the, you know, as far as the actual special
the
and
time
what it
slot
happened,
on TV, yes.
it was not his idea. So I just thought that was really great. I really loved the character of Steve Bender in the movie. And I've watched, and it was pretty much true to form. Like, I watched several interviews with Steve Bender, and he said all that really happened. Like, he says, you know, when he met with Elvis, and he said Elvis point blank asked him, what do you think of my career? Where do you think my career is at right now? He was like, I literally just looked at him and blurted out, it's in the toilet. And he said, then I was like, oh, crap. But he was like, Elvis laughed, and he was like, thank you for telling me the truth. That's who I want. That's what I want to know. And, you know, he said also, Steve Bender said that he just ignored the Colonel during this whole 68 comeback special. He was like, I didn't listen to anything he had to say. I ignored him. We just did what we thought needed to be done and what was best for Elvis.
Yeah. So I thought that was
oh my gosh. And then just one final thing about Austin.
Oh no, my backdrop. Oh, my backdrop just got cut in half.
Okay, that was weird that I said one more thing about Austin. And then
that is weird.
Anyway.
That's our makeshift background.
Yeah. But one more thing about Austin, the 68 comeback special performance of If I Can Dream in the movie.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Was really good. You know, that's that whole like quote you see on TV where they're like, on the previews they do for the movie, and they're like, Austin Butler stared down the lens of the camera and melted it. That's the shot, you know, is the If I Can Dream. But I thought that was such an impactful part of the whole movie, was that performance. And I, you know, think that will draw a lot of new people and new fans to really delve into Elvis and who he was as an artist and his music. And just the whole way that they framed the 68 comeback special, and they kind of did this throughout the movie, but the whole way they framed the 68 comeback special around all the like turmoil and the craziness going on in the world and what was happening and the assassination.
Well, and the whole
Bobby Kennedy and like, you know, how they how they kind of, you know, played in or like portrayed all of that as like what was going on at those times, you know, in history, as well as, you know, here's Elvis making history as an artist and as a music icon, but also other things were going on in history and were making history. And, you know, that had to be an effect on Elvis as well, and a struggle for Elvis. And I think it, you know, really showed Elvis's, you know, compassion for
everyone,
the country.
Yeah, and the country. Well, and I think that was a big thing throughout the movie. You know, there's that quote from it that's so good where Elvis remembers, you know, if you can't say anything about it, sing about it.
Yeah,
and that was the whole point of If I Can Dream.
Told him, where you can't say
and
it, sing it.
Yeah, and that was kind of, because Elvis never did get up and you know, say political views or all that, and I appreciated that.
Yes,
but he kind of let you know through what he was singing or doing, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, because you
so
think about
I thought that was a pivotal.
Yeah,
pivotal
and that's another thing about, you know, that's another thing about like Elvis's just relevance and importance in the history of music. Is that Elvis was constantly like bringing people together,
and culture and segregation and all that.
Like bringing it together,
instrumental.
Because like, you know, the If I Can Dream song, you know, like, you know, later on when he did In the Ghetto, you know, singing and covering like socially, you know, songs and stuff. Yeah, amazing. So I love the 68 stuff because, like I said, I thought it had so many like emotional ups and downs. Like, you know, I don't know. I thought it was really exciting. Like when you see Austin coming out from behind in the black leather, it was just, you know, like super exciting. And then it got super sad with the whole like back and forth between him and Colonel Tom and the whole like, you know, assassination thing. And then the If I Can Dream. And then, you know, you kind of see, you know, like when Elvis and the Colonel had that whole fight in the dressing room.
Yes.
You know, where, you know, Colonel Tom is trying to manipulate Elvis. And, you know, this movie did a great job of showing like Colonel Tom's true, as Tom Hanks said, diabolical genius of how, you know, he would literally take something and just like manipulate the heck out of it, you know, and then try to make you like feel bad about what you were thinking or what you were saying and, you know, stuff. So, it, you know, it made you mad, it made you angry, but then it made you like proud, you know, when he did the like If I Can Dream, and then it just like literally made me bust out laughing about that whole Christmas sweater thing. And then when Colonel Tom brings the singer people back the next day and he has the sweater on.
Yes.
And then he's like, the Christmas song is next. Here comes Santa Claus is next. And he's like, is it Mr. Bender? It was just, the whole thing was fun.
Super fun.
It like gave it a good like lighthearted moment and break.
That you needed.
Yes, that the movie needed.
Yeah. So I think next, before we take a chunk at the 70s in the ending, let's talk about a little bit about his relationships, and then maybe about our favorite and least favorite characters. So I'll start off with the relationship it showed between he and Gladys and Vernon. I thought this was one of the best portrayals of that I've ever seen, because in most everything you see with him, they kind of gloss over like, oh, he and Gladys, we all know they were very tight and that they had a very unique, super close relationship. But they always portray it as like, oh, they just got along great and everything was wonderful, and she was this doting mom that just loved him, no matter what. But like, I think this movie really showed the dynamic between them, how they were both stubborn, they were both hard-headed. I've read articles where they said they used to have some epic dinner fights, and I was glad that this kind of showed. I'm sure it's not verbatim, because everybody's all like, I'm sure he wouldn't talk to his mom like that. We don't know. I'm sure it wasn't verbatim,
we all get frustrated.
Yeah, you get frustrated with everybody in your life. So I thought it was a great, more humanizing, more realistic take on his relationship with his parents.
Yes.
And then the whole, you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, number one, I was glad that they included Gladys in this and included her in it
prominent
prominently in the first half. Because again, we all know that, unfortunately, Gladys passed away very soon on, and she really only got to see the very beginnings of Elvis's career and stuff. But yeah, I mean, we all know that like Gladys was the single most important person in Elvis's life and his greatest love. His biggest love was her, and the profound effect that her death had on Elvis throughout the rest of his life is just unimaginable. And I'm sure one of the things that led to many of the things that happened with Elvis. But yeah, I was glad to see that they did a lot of time with Gladys and stuff. And like Holly said, I'm glad that they didn't make her just a one-dimensional character and almost make her just a side note, because that is, we all know a lot about their like relationship, that Elvis was a mama's boy and she doted on him, and rightly so. I mean, it talks about how when she lost Jesse, like she never got over that. And then that probably made her like tenfold protective and obsessive over Elvis. And I thought it was great to see that she, wasn't just always sad and just always like there and in the background, that, she did have a lot of personality and stuff. And, they say that that's where Elvis got his temper. They say that Elvis, could like have a temper like that and could fight and whatever, and they say that he got that from Gladys. So I think it was good to see that relationship portrayed. And then
moving on to he and Vernon, wow, there's a lot I could say about that. It was just I think it really portrayed their relationship really well, and how it's pretty realistic from what I can tell. And it was kind of some of the saddest parts. And some of the kind of most heartbreaking parts was just Vernon throughout Elvis's career. You could just tell, not that Vernon was a villain or that he was a bad guy, you could just tell he didn't know what to do. He was overwhelmed. This was not his arena. Business was not his forte. And he was, the president of EPE at that point. So, it just showed how complicated their relationship was. One of the scenes is towards the end of the movie where Elvis is trying to split off with the Colonel. This is like in Vegas, later years. And he's trying to split off with the Colonel. And of course the Colonel comes back with some scheme. And, Vernon, you can tell he doesn't know what to do. And it's like Elvis wants to leave the Colonel, but he kind of sees the fear in his dad's eyes and the uncertainty. So he just goes back. So it just kind of was a great show of how their relationship worked, I thought.
Yeah, well, and it kind of showed you with both Gladys and Vernon. I think, when Elvis became Elvis, neither one of them knew how to handle it.
Yeah.
You know,
who would?
Yeah, neither one knew how to handle it, and it was kind of like all of a sudden they went from this shack in Tupelo to moving from place to place to not having a steady place to live or income to all of a sudden they're living in Graceland, and Elvis is the #1 artist in the world and the most popular thing, and it's like, you know, how do you handle that? And, you know, I think they did a good job of showing how that was a lot of Gladys's demise.
Yes.
You know, once Elvis like started kind of becoming Elvis, the star, you know, she thought he was going to lose himself, and that he was losing himself, and she thought she was going to lose him. And then especially when he went off to the army, you know, that was like, she couldn't handle it. It was like losing, you know, a son all over again, because she'd never been away from him, and, you know, she was so fearful as to what was going to happen to him, and, you know,
So I thought overall it was short, but I mean, you know, there's a time frame, but it was a short showing of his relationship with them, but I think it was well fleshed out.
Yeah.
So let's move on to his relationship with Priscilla.
Okay. Well, I have several things to say about this.
Good.
I have several things to say about this. So a lot of people out there are a little like upset and angry that it didn't show other relationships of Elvis's, that it didn't include Linda Thompson, it didn't include Ginger Alden, and, you know, things like that. And they're saying you can't really tell the Elvis story without them. Well, let me say this. So, again, this was from Colonel Tom's perspective, and this was his and Elvis's relationship. And so to tell that story, those relationships, it would have been hard to figure out how to, like, work those in and make them make sense. And
because I think the Colonel could have cared less about Elvis's private life, aside from Priscilla.
Yeah. Well, but out of all of Elvis's relationships, love Priscilla or not, she is the most important woman and female in Elvis's life. She's the one he was with the longest. She was the one who was married to him. She's the one who had his child. And she was there for a lot of pivotal moments and times in Elvis's life. It was almost like, you know, Elvis and Priscilla grew up together. You know, I mean, she was only 14 when Elvis met her. He was in his early 20s in the army, but they pretty much grew up together, and Elvis, in a way, almost raised Priscilla. You know,
shaped her.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she kind of became what Elvis wanted her to be, as far as how she looked, how she dressed, how she acted, what she did, where she went. You know, like he was in total control of that, and so you couldn't do this movie without her and without that relationship. And I don't think, you know, like somebody literally clocked it, and somebody was like, out of the whole like 2 hours and 39 minutes, she only got like 26 minutes of airtime. That's not a lot compared to the whole movie.
I don't know. That's probably more than I thought.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, she was there during all of the important times in Elvis's life. And, you know, say what you want or not, you know, Elvis and Priscilla remained close and remained friends, as they should, especially having a daughter, you know, throughout the rest of Elvis's life. I mean, there's nobody that probably knew him better and shared more of his secrets than Priscilla. You know, so you have to include her in this movie.
Yeah, one of my favorite, well, I mean, it's not my favorite, but one of my favorite scenes is when she's leaving Elvis. And, you know, she's like, and he's all like, oh, is it because of the girls? And she's like, no. She's like, I've known about that for, you know, which I'm sure she did. She knew about that from day one. But she was like, you know, it's your lifestyle, it's the drug use, it's, you know, you're never here. And when you are here, you're not mentally here. Like, you know, so I thought that was a really great scene.
Yeah, that was a great scene. Well, and it was a great scene when Priscilla is at that Las Vegas opening show. And Elvis is kissing that girl, and the Colonel looks over and sees Priscilla, and he makes the whole comment about, you know, at that moment you could see in her eyes that she knew she would never compete with you. You know, meaning like Elvis's love of the fans and the fans' love for him.
So I thought it had great pivotal moments of her. It showed you that she was kind of cute and feisty. That's how they met, and probably how he fell in love. And then it showed that how supportive she was through all the stuff. And then it shows that scene where she breaks up and she's like, look, I gotta look after me. Which, you know, everybody's always like, I would have never left Elvis. You don't know. We walk a mile in my shoes. So that was really good. So so I overall really enjoyed and I'm sure Priscilla did. I enjoyed her portrayal. I'll tell you, that last scene, well, we'll get to that later. towards the end. Some of his other relationships, I mean, we've already kind of discussed his relationship with Colonel Tom. I thought it did a really, really good job of fleshing out both characters. You know, there's just not a lot known about Colonel Tom. He's kind of mysterious in his younger days, but I just thought it did flesh out their relationship really well.
Well, it just showed you like how toxic their relationship was. Literally, Elvis and the Colonel Tom were like a bad marriage that you can't get out of. You know, it's like Elvis definitely needed the Colonel. The Colonel definitely needed Elvis. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, Elvis was the Colonel's meal ticket.
Oh, for
you
sure.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, he was his golden ticket. But like we said, Elvis was so focused on the music and the artistry and stuff. He needed a businessman or a manager. He needed someone that could handle all of the bookings and the tours and the merchandise and the sales and the contracts and all of that. Unfortunately, he chose, you know, a shyster and a manipulator. And, you know, I guess it's kind of one of those, like, you get in so deep and then you're like, how do I get out of this?
Yeah.
Because really, you know, in my opinion, this is my opinion, in my opinion, Elvis should have left the Colonel in later years. He should have moved on. Because Elvis was Elvis Presley. You know, I mean, Elvis, he could have had a rock as a manager and they could have managed him. I mean, you've got the hottest, easiest commodity to promote and manage that there is.
Well, I think he could have kept Colonel Tom on. I think he should have got a different manager and maybe creative partner, producer, and then just kept the Colonel on to focus on merchandise and promoting and like marketing, advertising, like, because he was a genius at that. So keep him on at that, but don't let him control where you go, where you have a concert at.
Yeah.
You know, all that.
Yeah, because, you know, people can say what they want about the Colonel and, like, he was, you know, horrible for Elvis in his career or whatever. But you've also, and I think this shone light on that, you've also got to look at the Colonel's, like, contributions, like, to Elvis's career.
And to music in
general. Yeah, like, for instance, you know, he was the one that came along and took Elvis from Sun Records and got him the RCA record label, which then just catapulted Elvis as far as stardom and airplay and being, you know, all over the country instead of just like locally in Memphis and Tennessee. And then, you know, he got him the TV appearances, you know, and the Frank Sinatra stuff, you know, even the Army years, you know, and that's one of the things I think shown Colonel Tom's brilliance the most and probably helped Elvis's career the most. But, you know, when Elvis went off to the Army for those 2 years, Elvis was still the best-selling artist that whole time, without any shows, without any concerts, without any appearances. And how do you do that? You do that by Colonel Tom.
Yeah.
You know, he was literally still putting out records and putting out music on Elvis so that people were still having the opportunity to hear Elvis and buy Elvis's records and things. And he kept Elvis in the forefront and kept him out there for 2 years while he was gone. Because think about it, you know, had like Elvis went off to the Army and like Colonel Tom just sat back and said, well, you know, we'll just pick back up once you come back from the Army.
He'd have been dead in the war.
Yeah. I mean, would, you know, how long would it have taken him to build back? You know, would he have been able to? You know, who knows what would have happened? So that, you know, truly showed like a lot of Colonel Tom's like influence and input and his brilliance as far as Elvis's career.
So as far as all the other, they couldn't. There just wasn't time. They couldn't really delve into his relationship with the band, with Jerry Schilling, with the mafia. I mean, they touched a little points on it, and I thought they did a good job of that, of kind of showing how sometimes, you know, there was tension between Elvis and the mafia or Elvis and Jerry, and, you know, as I'm sure there was. So I thought that was great with all the relationships. I think if we could get to this 4-hour cut, I think they said he's delved a little bit more, especially with his relationship with the band. Yeah. So I'd love to see that.
I read a lot about what Baz said about like all the stuff they filmed, and he's like, there was so much we filmed that we wanted to include, but there was just no way to make it make sense and no way to include it in the time frame. But yeah, there's a whole like lot that delves into the band relationships. There's a lot that delves into the other women. So I think they delve into the Linda and the Ginger years and stuff. There's more, because one thing I liked seeing was the Graceland. I thought they did a great job of the recreation
Fantastic.
of Graceland in the 50s. And it was so cool to see like the dining room and the living room and the music room.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice to see the jungle room or even that like downstairs, man cave and stuff. It would have been,
there's
cool
a whole
to see
scene
that.
with the jungle room, but that's
Yes,
not included.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He has all of that. And even, a lot of people, and going back to Colonel Tom and his kind of influence is, he was the one that did the whole Aloha from Hawaii, the satellite special and everything. And a lot of people were saying they were upset that there wasn't more included about the Aloha special.
I was a little bit.
I would have liked to have seen some performance stuff from that. I think it would have been cool to see like Austin like getting off that plane and all those people putting the lays on Elvis and
I'm sure
greeting
it's
the fans. Yes, and then some of the performances from that. I think that would have been cool, and I'm sure they probably have that. So hopefully we'll get this extended version.
So let's talk about the 70s years and the ending, and then we'll maybe do a little, if we have time, we'll do a little rapid fire questioning. The ending, oh my gosh, y'all, because you know what I said, I love 70s Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah,
I thought it was great. I love how it was realistic in a sense of it touched on the good and the bad, a lot of the bad, but it did it in a very classy, very tasteful way. I really enjoyed, somebody was saying this too, I really enjoyed how the movie kind of trails off. The last scene, which is one of my favorite scenes, is when he and Priscilla are in the car and they're talking and she's trying to get him to go to a drug rehab thing, and he's, at this point I think he was 39 because he says a thing like, Priscilla, I'm going to be 40 and I'm not, what did he say? He said, it was so sad, he said,
I'm not going to be remembered. I've done nothing to
memorable.
Be remembered for.
So, and I was like, right there, tears flowing, y'all. Probably the last 10, 15 minutes, Holly Norman had her Kleenex out. It was so sad. But I do appreciate that they didn't go past that. I'm glad they didn't show those last couple of years of when he had gained weight and was probably kind of, in his haze and fog. So I was glad they just kind of showed him at that low point and then flash forward to, the ending. Which, go ahead. I know you were going to say something about the ending.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that was also one of the things that I was a little trepidatious about with this movie and with Baz's whole thing is I was like, and I think a lot of you were, because some of you were sending Holly messages being like, did they really portray up the drug abuse and like, what did they show and did it make Elvis look bad and did whatever, but I, like Holly, I thought Baz did a great job of, it was there and he touched on it. And you definitely knew that it was a problem, but it was very, very tasteful and very respectful of Elvis and stuff. And I think the whole movie also showed, though, like a lot of other things that led to the end for Elvis and led to his demise. It wasn't and contributed to the drug use, and so
a couple of the saddest points with that were, of course, the hotly contested scene where he's trying to get on stage and he just like passes out. And they get the ice bucket and they like dunk his head and, Colonel's saying, I don't care what happens to him, just get him on stage. And so they're like trying to pump him with adrenaline and all that. It was a terrible scene, but it was almost needed because it was so good too. I think it showed the Colonel and his true colors of like, get him on stage. And then I think it also showed the dynamic between he and Vernon. Because, there's a scene, if you haven't seen it, I'm spoiling it here, but, there's that scene where they're dunking his head, and some little lady comes up, I guess she's a nurse, and maybe she's Tish, I don't know, and she's just like, if this were my child, I would put him in the hospital, and Vernon's just kind of like, should, like in his eyes, he's like, should I, should I not?
And Colonel, you see Colonel's true manipulation, because he, like, turns around and, like, just looks at Vernon like, it's your decision. What are you going to do?
Yeah. How much money are we going to lose if he doesn't go on? Like, so, and then, Vernon's response is, Dr. Nick, what can you do for him? So that was a poignant thing. And then I thought another part that was good that kind of just teased it, and only true Elvis fans know how detrimental that was. Maybe a casual fan would know, but like when they're doing that big scene I talk about towards the end where the Colonel's manipulated Elvis and Elvis is trying to get away from him, and Vernon comes in there because at this point, supposedly, the Colonel, Elvis fired him, and the Colonel said, okay, fine, but you owe me $8.5 million. And Vernon's like, we don't have the money. And Elvis is like, what do you mean we don't? So it's showing like, okay, Vernon and Elvis, not great with, tracking the money.
Yeah.
So Elvis, has to bow down and get put back in his cage, so to speak, and take the Colonel back. And at the very end, he's closing the curtains, and he just says, "Call Dr. Nick and tell him I need to see him." Well, we all know what that entailed. If you're a true Elvis fan, you knew what all that entailed. So,
well, and I thought a cool thing about the whole 70s era and the ending and everything that Baz did, and if you listen, he would keep every so often playing the Suspicious Minds in the background of the scenes and things. And Baz has said this in many interviews, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Because, when Elvis first started the whole Vegas stint, he was on top of the world. He was ecstatic. He thought it was the greatest thing ever. And again, you see that manipulation scene in the movie where, Elvis is wanting to go nationwide and worldwide, and he's wanting to tour the world, and Colonel's not wanting him to, and he's trying to pull him back, and, he kind of puts this whole dangling carrot of the International Hotel out there, and Elvis is like, we can't afford it, and he's like, yes, we can, they'll pay for everything. Elvis is like, oh my gosh, this is great. I have all these ideas. I want this full orchestra band, and I want all these the Sweet Inspirations and the Imperials. And so that reignited, Elvis's excitement and passion, because Elvis always needed a challenge.
Yes.
And so then it becomes this great thing, but then it becomes this monotonous, year after year, show after show after show, and he was caught in a trap.
So true.
And that's what Baz says, and that's why I think, he's doing the Suspicious Minds constantly in the background, the song in the background, because that really sums it up. That whole 73 to 77, after the Vegas thing lost its luster and it became just the same old everything, and literally Elvis was caught in a trap. He was literally a rat or gerbil in a cage in the showroom of the International Hotel. Yeah. And all of that, continued to just lead to the demise and the end and everything of, Elvis not getting to do what he truly wanted to do, and to have a new challenge, which meant going worldwide, going to Japan, going to, everywhere.
And a lot of Elvis aficionados are all like, the speech wasn't correct, or he didn't say all that on stage or whatever. I don't think Baz meant it to be this is word for word what happened in, show number 73 of it. I think he was just okay, I've got to make a big scene, a big splash to get my point across of how unhappy Elvis was with the hotel owner, the Colonel, everybody. So he's I think Baz just took a liberty of I'm going to make this fake scene that parts may or may not have happened.
Because parts were true.
Parts were true.
Parts were true.
Yeah, and I'll be interested. We're going to talk to James Burton next time we see him. I'm going to be interested, which, by the way, they interviewed him, and he thought the movie was fantastic and Oscar-worthy. Yeah. Big praise from James Burton, who was there for, I heard, over 800 shows with Elvis. So it'll be interesting to, hear later down the road what he has to say about all that. And some of the others, everybody that was there. It'll be interesting. But, So, creative liberties were taken, but I thought it was necessary to get the point across of how low Elvis was at that point.
Well, it drove home that point of how did it get so bad in the end? Yeah. How did Elvis get to that point in the end? How did he get to where, he just was done? Yeah. So I thought that was really good. And then, just the, what are we talking about now?
So now the very, very end, because Heather and I had a little bit of a thing with that. Heather adored the ending, every single piece of it. I love the ending. I was boo-hooing. I was crying like a baby, but I didn't really like that they included the actual footage of Elvis singing Unchained Melody when we know he was not, vocally he was at his best, but when we know everything else about him was not at his best. I didn't know so much about including that, but Heather said it was a high point for her.
Well, see, I appreciated that. I thought the end was great. Number one, like I said, I was happy that he didn't go any deeper or crazier into the ending and the drug abuse, and that he kind of took it from, Elvis getting on this plane, kind of ending a good note with him and Priscilla, and then, off to the Unchained Melody thing, which, number one, I thought Austin's makeup and costuming was fantastic.
Wow.
And I thought it was really neat how they started with Austin singing it, and then it switched to actually Elvis singing it. But I thought that brought it all home. Because, again, one thing that this movie is trying to do is to bring light to people that don't really know the Elvis story or that maybe aren't fans, and help them know it and help them become fans. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, like we've said, a lot of people only know the last Elvis. A lot of people only know the 76, 77 Elvis that had become unhealthy, a little overweight, that had kind of lost some of his spark. And he became, you know, just this overweight like guy, character, Halloween costume that died on a toilet. And that's what they know. But you see all this 2.5 hours before this, and maybe how it got to that point. And so showing that scene, though, showing that particular scene, I think really drove home that, yes, this story didn't end well, and this story ended tragically, but good Lord, even in the weeks before his death, this man still had a love in his soul for the audience.
The music. Are you getting, Heather's getting verklempt. So yes, it showed.
But I don't even know.
Heather is getting verklempt over. Well, she loves Elvis, but
yes,
yeah.
No, that like it truly showed that, you know, he still could sing. He still had that
Yeah.
spark in his eye. You know, when he looks to the audience when he finishes the song, and you know, it was cool that Charlie was holding the mic for him. He was playing the piano himself. It was just him and the piano, so it almost took it back to the beginning. You know, when it was just Elvis and a guitar, or all those times when Elvis, you know, would just go to the piano. You know, when Priscilla says she'd come down at 4 a.m. in the morning, and Elvis would just be at the piano playing, singing to himself.
Yes.
It kind of, to me, brought it back to that, and that you still saw that he had so much music and love and passion in him, and so it made him real. It made this a real person.
So I will say this overall. Heather loved the ending. I'm still iffy on a part of it, but that's okay.
You just didn't like the Unchained Melody so much, and showing that, but I liked it. But I also loved how it didn't just end there. Then how Baz kind of brought in some of the other things, like he brought in the JC speech, which was one of my favorite.
That's how it should have ended. That's how it should have ended. You can't get a better ending.
One of my favorite moments of Elvis is when he gives that whole speech.
Yes,
and you know,
that
he
is one
says,
of my favorites too.
Every dream I've ever dreamed has come true 1,000 times. And you know that, and
that's how you end the movie, people. That should have been the ending scene.
But you know, like he brought in that, and then what was the other like little clip that he brought in? The whole thing, like his little thing about, you know, without a song, the day would never end. Without a song, the road would never bend. So I'll keep singing the song.
Yes, we all know the speech.
But yeah, so I thought, you know, it was really cool, and then just to, you know, see the actual like Elvis.
Yeah, that was cool. Now, that was cool. And some people said it, and it was funny because it was almost jarring to see him, because it's like Austin does such a good job that like halfway through the movie you're like, this is Elvis. I'm watching Elvis. And then when you see the real Elvis, you're like, oh, that's the real Elvis. Like, it was kind of jarring. You're like, oh crap, that's not Austin. That's the real Elvis. But so it was good. But what was I going to say? So to tie it all up, I think there's room for this. And Baz, I'm putting this out there for you. I honestly think he could do separate movies, like encapsulated. Like, have you ever seen a TV show and they call it like a bottle episode, of where they take one specific topic or characters and they delve into that deeper? Yeah. I honestly think he could make a movie about Elvis's relationship with the band. Yeah. Elvis and Priscilla, like deep dive Elvis and Priscilla. Maybe do it on Elvis and Linda or the later year. You know, I just think there's so much potential for more movies, honestly. Yeah. Yeah. If Austin would be up to the challenge.
Or just like a Netflix series in general.
Yes. And then I mean it, if Baz does not stop teasing about this 4-hour cut and put this on Blu-ray or DVD, I mean, I'm not going to be happy until I see all 4 hours. So let's do some rapid fire. Heather, I'll do some rapid fire with you. And please comment below.
All of y'all have been commenting, and we haven't even like.
But here's what we're going to do about that. Heather and I are going to go back and read all these comments. I'm going to jot down some notes. We will do a part 2, and we're going to talk back and forth with you guys. We just wanted to kind of get our thoughts out, and I know Heather's long-winded, so I was like, if we talk to people too, this will be a 5-hour Facebook Live. What time frame are we at?
No, we're good. It's 12:10.
Okay, so rapid fire. Heather.
Yes.
Aside from Elvis, because we all know he's the favorite, who was your favorite character?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, there were several. I mean, I really liked Colonel Tom. I mean, you know,
Heather, rapid fire.
Colonel Tom, Gladys, and Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Who was your least favorite character?
Dixie Locke.
Only because she probably was only in it for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Who was your favorite character?
Steve Bender,
Yeah.
Jerry Schilling.
Yeah, I was gonna say those two as well.
And yeah, so I for supporting characters, I thought they were
Least favorite.
Oh, and Little Richard.
Least favorite.
Vernon.
Oh, yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see
Vernon.
that. Yeah.
Heather, your favorite scene of all?
I mean,
Heather, rattle off 2.
How do you pick? Like the whole 68 comeback special thing. And oh my gosh, probably like the Suspicious Minds performance.
Okay. My favorite scene, Elvis and Priscilla in the car.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Them in the car,
Yeah.
and probably Elvis when the 2 performances when he's in that pink suit in the 50s, and he just the crowd goes wild. I thought Austin's performance was electric, and then when he does that charitable thing where he's like rolling around with the dog and all that, the look on Austin's face.
Yeah, I was gonna say that whole Trouble song and
one of
his
my favorite scenes.
grit and passion in it was awesome.
All right,
And Austin's crying scenes.
oh,
He did such a great
yes.
job. It was literally like the emotion, like he was literally crying.
Sound off in the comments. Who's your favorite character? Who's your least favorite? What was your favorite scene? What's your least favorite? All right, let's see. What else can I ask you about this movie? What was your favorite song in it? And even though we've not heard the full soundtrack, who do you think is going to be your favorite on the soundtrack?
Oh, I don't know because I've paid some attention to who's on the soundtrack. Like I know.
Just think about in the movie. Like my favorite.
I'm just gonna have to say that I liked the Sister Rosetta Tharpe character.
Me too.
Comes out with, ain't nothing but I was like, dang.
That was a great moment.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I think my favorite is the weird how they've done it in the trailers, the Suspicious Minds, but it sounds like he's in a tunnel and it's real haunting. You know how they do that? I think that's going to be my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. All right.
I thought overall too, and we didn't really hit on this per se, but just overall, all of the accuracies with the costuming and the sets and the cars and everything was awesome.
Amazing.
Austin's outfits and everything.
Oh, amazing.
Holly and I were talking about this the other night. Even when they're doing the movie thing and the Little Less Conversation, and he has the turtleneck with the jacket and the
that's the most he looks like Elvis, I think.
Yes.
That is the most he looks
but
like Elvis.
That costuming and look perfect. Even the picture of him and Priscilla with Lisa Marie and they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And like we said, the whole the way that Graceland looked and everything, and just the purple car that he drives out angry at Gladys with. Just all of that was so good.
Yeah, if
his
anything,
whole kind of electric uniform even.
Yeah, if this thing does not get best costumes and best cinematography, those people are asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, and seriously, Austin deserves best actor.
Oscar.
He deserves this.
And this soundtrack should get a Grammy. I'm just going to say it should get a Grammy.
Yeah. Because, and Holly and I were talking about this the other night, too. When you're talking about putting somebody, up against Tom Hanks, who is a legendary actor, who's done every different kind of role, from comedy to serious to, and played every kind of character in his movies, and nailed it and just whatever. When you can overshadow him and stand toe-to-toe with him in a film, then job well done, and Austin did.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to wrap it up with that. We know it was long, but as you can tell, Heather's passionate about this, as am I. But leave your comments. Leave any questions you have. We are going to do a part 2 maybe next week, and we'll answer them all, and we'll talk a little more back and forth about the movie, because I'm sure some of you are going to go see it once again this week, so that'll be great. So take care, stay safe, and go see this Elvis movie. Bye.
Bye.